Hello, good morning, welcome back. I'm Zachariah Markowski with Sharper Pen Image Consulting. Today I'll be continuing our ongoing literary analysis of American writer David Foster Wallace's essay E Unibus Pluram, which means from one come many, right? And it's an ironic take on our nation, the United States motto, right? From many come one, well, from one come many, right? So we left off last night, the video that's about to be uploaded this morning, talking about basically TV culture, the irony of it, how commercialism had used our highest and lowest arts in tandem to create a perversely enslaving commercial culture whose a lot of messaging exists on the fact of pointing out like, hey, there's nothing you can do about it, lone viewer. You just have to suck it and then buy the product. But hey, at least you know that it's a scam. At least you know it's a lie, right? That the irony of it all is tyrannical. And that I made parallels between George Orwell's 1984. That irony is tyranny in the sense that no one says directly what they mean. And then that itself becomes a clue. Does that mean it's impossible to say what you mean? Are you too chicken shit to say what you mean? Are you just in it for yourself, right? What are you lying about? Why are you lying? Why are you like this? Why is the culture like this? And I left off on a kind of dismal remark and indictment of our culture that for everyone who picks up all the rubble and the pieces to then create a living out of it within our culture, our monetary systems, our art, whatever it is, for everyone who engages in most of these practices, almost nobody knows where it comes from, whether it's old or new, or why they're doing it. They just know they're doing it because it's popular, because monkey see, monkey do. Our culture has long made its biggest money off of conformity, off of cloning objects, images, people, you name it. Just copy, copy, copy until you oversaturate the market, go on to the next thing, right? So this is, and then, because everyone knows this is the cynicism of it, right? That, these companies and these corporations market to the lone viewer and the isolated viewer. They twist the knives of fear and insecurity, no different than politics, to then get you to join in on this buying crowd whom has the answer, right? And the irony of it is that, hey, your MySpace, your iPhone, this world that you can curate for yourself, all this data you can play with, look, this little hole you can dive in all by yourself, right? That we can give you access to it. And part of the fantasy that's sold is transcending the everyday mundanity of American life, right? Because our TV culture sells the opposite. It sells glamour. Yes, it sells practical commercial solutions for businesses and blah, blah, blah. Enter your corporate slogans and sloganeering here. But this is exactly what I was trying to point out. What's so dismal is that everything that exists, from what's taught in school to the school itself, to the belief system, to the people and how they think, are products of the last 50 to 100 years. If you look at our old history textbooks, they have changed. They don't read what they once used to, and they're going to keep rewriting them as they need. And then you can question, why do we keep doing this? It's because we have to change the people to change with the times to accommodate the power and the war that is taking place. You forgot there's a war going on. There is a perpetual war going on. And it's one of three superpowers. America's commercial culture is how we fund our war, a big part of it, right? Because everything else is squandered and wasted in the war. It's just, this is where, home base is home base. So this is what we've cultivated. This is what we've created. And what I said last night is that the same people out there on the market, picking, choosing, buying, selling, most of them don't know why they're doing it, how they're doing it. They're modern people who are a product of this system that was created in the last 50 to 100 years. They don't even know or understand that, right? They have no concept of anything outside of it, that humanity used to be different, that the history books used to read differently. Part of the cynicism is that most Americans don't read. They don't read anything at all. They don't read much past high school, much past college, and then from there it's all just whatever's the commercial hit, whatever exists within the shallow zeitgeist, that thing that can monetarily charge life but can't support life. So to get straight into the essay, well, not straight into the essay, 5 minutes in to get to the essay, before I resume picking up where we left off on the commercialism within 80s and 90s television and how these straw men came to represent, like straw men within our culture came to represent old-fashioned values of which modern heroes, i.e. cynical motherfuckers, then knock these little straw men over going, ha, you stand for single entendre values? Oh, in this hateful corporate world that where love can't exist, ha, aren't you stupid? Aren't you naive, right? How could you believe, how could you have hope? How could you have faith in anything? You have faith in mankind? Let me tear you down a peg, right? The standard in our culture from the 85% proletariat to the top, like at the end of the day, it's conflict, right? And that's where we pride ourselves. We pride ourselves on being a backbiting, kind of argumentative, often petty people, right? That everyone wants to argue all the time. That it's the name of our politics. It's the name of the media. The communication is the fight, is the form, right? So Wallace is saying he has a thesis here. I want to convince you that irony, poker face silence, and fear of ridicule are distinctive of those features of contemporary US culture, right? It's not normal, it's not sane, is what he's saying, of which cutting edge fiction is a part, that enjoy any significant relation to the television whose weird, pretty hand has my generation by the throat. And remember, television, for our intents and purposes here, is interchangeable now with social media, and now it's all encompassing, right? No matter where you go, there's a television screen, there's a recorder, there's someone with a camera, there's TVs everywhere, whether that's the gas pump or a restaurant. You can't find any silence. It's just constant bombardment on the human mind. So he's saying that this television and the fiction and the image has people by the throat. Same thing with social media. I'm going to argue that irony and ridicule are entertaining and effective, and that at the same time they are agents of a great despair and stasis in US culture, right? What have I been talking about? Time has stopped. And that for aspiring fictionists, they pose terrifically vexing problems. Vexing is like damning, a conundrum, right? It's confusing, it's consternating, it's confounding, it's upsetting, any number of things that kind of blend in to make it a vexing problem. So my two big premises are that on one hand, a certain subgenre of pop-conscious postmodern fiction written mostly by young Americans has lately arisen and made a real attempt to transfigure a world of and for appearance, mass appeal, and television. Right? It's basically he's pointing out that hey, the artists of our culture realized the swill that was being produced. And then on the other hand, televisual culture and somehow evolved to a point where it seemed invulnerable to any such transfiguring assault. There is no elevating it. And he does say that it's about idiosyncratic diversity, right? That the people's a person, whether it's an individual or a group, their lower class taste versus their higher class taste is going to vary, right? What they actually uphold or think of as their values is going to be different than what they might consider a luxury or a waste of time, right? Guilty pleasures, right? People watching reality TV or whatever the guilty pleasures are these days. Or again, just back to Joe Briefcase. Remember in the 90s, Joe Briefcase was watching 6+ hours of TV. For the average millennial, the zillennials, the Gen Alpha, Gen X, all of them, basically, again, how much time do they spend consuming media every day? And the cynicism, what's so sad about it, what's bad about it is, or the idea that it's unhealthy is that that's time they could be spent meaningfully doing other things, meaningfully interacting with people, meaningfully creating or building or doing something with their hands, networking, any number of things other than just passively taking what is an assault on their senses and manipulate that's all designed, right? Remember, the content only exists to sell ad space. It was like that with newspapers. It became like that with the internet. Once upon a time, it wasn't like this. But as the corporation gained more control, as small business died, as the individual man died, and the mass man, who is a consumer, who was designed to be a consumer in the last 50 to 100 years, as American society created this ideal model of a supposed human being, right? This is how it's all this is just what's been fabricated, and it's not their fault. I'm not trying to say, right, like, because this is part of the cynicism of the advertising basically says, hey, fuck you, you're wrong for existing, look how stupid you are here watching this, you're so stupid for watching this, but hey, wink wink, I all like, it's like a drug. It really is. It's hard not to see our media, the television companies, every marketer therein, social media, everyone presenting their picturesque, perfect image to the world. And I get it, it's part of the competition. I get it, it's part of the fun. I get it, it can be artistic, but for most people, it's not fun. Most people are not living the high life. Most people are not inner or outer party members. Most people are the 85% who have hardly ever, who have always scraped to get by. Through all of human history, they've barely existed. They don't have names, they don't have families, they're generally torn apart and enslaved, but there they exist at the bottom. And our TV culture basically exists to capitalize on that, to sell to the nameless masses. Remember, if a drug dealer is smart, if a politician is smart, they don't actually buy or use or take what they're selling, right? They don't even believe in it, they just know they have to perform. That's why this hollow image culture is so deeply unsatisfying. It's why irony and cynicism are just rattling your cage bars. You're saying, hey, look how horrible it is, look how totalitarian and encompassing it is, even as a soft or a harder tyranny, right? Because you can say that it's just a soft tyranny and you kind of have freedom, but it's like, no, you only ever have so much freedom before. When does someone call the authority? Whether that's, and there's a number of authorities they can call, not just people with strangers with guns, right? So going back to his thesis, he's saying that the cynicism, this irony, this television culture is a problem for artists, is a problem for writers, it's a problem for people who actually care. It's a problem for people who actually love art and who have a natural disposition to create it and do it, versus everyone who imitates it for $1, thus degrade it, right? This is the prisoner condition of it. My two big premises are that, on the one hand, a certain subgenre of pop-conscious postmodern fiction, while mostly by young Americans, has lately arisen and made a real attempt to transfigure. TV, in other words, has become able to capture and neutralize any attempt to change or even protest the attitudes of passive unease and cynicism TV requires of audience in order to be commercially and psychologically viable at doses of several houses per day. Basically, marketers, advertisers, sloganeers, Edward Bernays, Rockefeller, the school system, they basically figured out how to design the American mind to accept a narrow range of commercially viable options and to reject everything all else. And don't get me wrong, this is how culture has always worked. Once upon a time, like when in our tribal days, you would have had a family deities, you would have worshipped the altar of your family, you would have worshipped and cared about the people around you who actually were involved in your life, not strangers that were a million miles, not your owners, right? So this is the prisoner nature of it, was that all, like, that family art, that family love, that earnest creation, that honest creation, that original creation, the ancient creation, what is most ancient and real in us, has been co-opted and put on this conveyor belt of factory, I was going to say factory farming, but I think it's factory dysfunction, really. So basically, it's self-protected. They created this prison and then threw away the key, right? It's so all-encompassing, it's so powerful that everyone fights against it. Oh, you want the like in these days, you can hear the slave class, you can hear the proletariat, you can hear the bottom 85%, Republican or Democrat, sitting there go, oh, you want regulation, you want the government to break up monopolies. Oh, you don't want these oligarchies to have all the power. You don't Oh, you're upset that this fake world has been designed for you to capture a surplus of your cognition and capitalize on your work. And either way, you exist as a unit thereof, but not outside or in relation to. You are owned thereby, right? It's all encompassing. It's totalitarian. And the fight in the media is just two sides bickering, right? Because remember, like in the 1984 world, a word carries its opposite. So they decide, hey, just get rid of the opposite. Why would you need bad if you have good? Right? You can have good and good plus, you don't need bad. Look to our politics, look to our media, look to the doublespeak, look to the PR speak, public relations, human resources, political jargon, right? What are they doing? Right? These aren't homeless Americans, they're temporarily unhoused, right? This isn't a national market crisis, like, well, they're hiding that for right now. Or they're being real coy about it. It's funny how the media is presenting this. Basically, a bigger wealth destruction than 2008 has been happening the last week, and no one, like, you guys are still barely noticing. No one in mass has noticed, right? They froze the stock market. How often do they do that? The richest people sold off a lot. Like, what's that tell you? It's just, and again, that everyone will sit there and defend this behavior, that the proletariat defend this behavior, that the slaves defend their masters. So that's what irony is, right? And that's the world of 1984, and that's contemporary US culture. And then, just as equally dismal as any kind of bland optimism in relation to because the people who say, oh yeah, but don't be a doomer, don't do this, don't do that, look how good it is and progress and blah blah blah. It's like they have no idea that their vapid modern uh, just lack of understanding was also curated and designed and also doesn't matter to any kind of system they're in, like, because it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, they'll sell you a solution, they'll sell you a pill. It all gets swallowed up there. And you understand what I mean, that when I say that everything flows back to the house never loses, everything can only serve the house, nothing is against the house never loses, right? This is successful tyranny, a tyranny that doesn't even like to have a tyranny, and for people to not even realize that that's what that is. And that for the party members, they know what it is. They're not stupid. The people who think they're stupid are the stupid ones, actually. Right? Because it's an intentional blindness. And then they can think it's a lack of common sense. They can think it's smart people just being dumb. But again, they're the simple ones. So, image fiction. The particular fictional subgenre I have in mind is called by some editors postmodernism and by some critics hyperrealism. Most of the younger readers, and oh man, and I guess in modern terms you could think of like the Lego Movie or Aqua Teen Hunger Force, or a lot of this modern fiction that started moving in this YouTube or TikTok direction, where it's basically a dystopian music video of body parts and images and a bunch of incoherent, whether it's a positive or a negative narrative, the whole thing is incoherent and doesn't even have a context or a subtext or a rootedness or a relatedness in which to exist to people. So it's very disjointed. It's very bewildering to people and to children. So the particular fictional, okay, postmodernism. Most of the younger readers and writers I know call it the fiction of image. Image fiction is basically a further involution of the relations between lit and pop that blossomed with the '60s postmodernists. If the postmodern church fathers found pop images valid reference and symbols in fiction, and if in the '70s and early '80s the appeal to the features of mass culture shifted from use to mention, certain avant-gardists started to treat the pop and TV and watching as themselves fertile subjects. The new fiction of image uses the transient received myths of popular culture as a world in which to imagine fictions about quote unquote real, albeit pop mediated public characters. Early uses of images tactics can be seen in DeLillo, of Great Jones Street, The Couver of Burning, and in Max Apple, whose '70s short story The Oranging of America projected an interior life onto the figure of Howard Johnson. But in the late '80s, despite publisher unease over the legalities of imagining private lives for public figures, a real bumper crop of this behind the glass stuff started appearing, authored largely by writers who didn't know or cross fertilize one another. Apple's Profiteers, Jay Cantor's Crazy Cat, Coover's A Night at the Movies, or You Must Remember This, William T. Vollmann's You Bright and Risen Angel, Stephen Dixon's movies, '70s stories, and DeLillo's own fictional hologram of Oswald and Libra are all notable post-'85 instances. Observe too that, in another '80s medium, the Artie Zelig Purple Rose of Cairo and Sex Lies and Videotape, plus the low-budget scanners of Videodrome and Shockers, all began to treat screens as permeable. And this really came home to roost in reality TV. And by then, it was just it was this persona of image fiction that existed postmodernism, right? It was like almost like the TV cycle resetting itself, figuring out how to recapitalize in between its introvertive and extrovertive oriented sales cycles. So it's in the last couple of years that the image fiction scene has really taken off. So I don't want to. He's getting into like the history of it. We don't have to do that right here, to go through necessarily every little instance. And I suggest you do read the essay or the audio essay, which you can find on YouTube. One thing I have to insist you realize about this. Here's where what's getting to the point. One thing I have to insist that you realize about this new subgenre is that it's distinguished not just by a certain neo-postmodern technique, but by a genuine socio-artistic agenda, right? And remember, we exist in the blowing out of this world. We exist in the aftermath of this. Basically, our culture got blown out beyond any coherent narrative, right? This is hyperrealism. This is image fiction. This is, hey, everything that exists can exist, and the people keep transfiguring and reconfiguring that within our commercial culture. It's sold as art and distraction and entertainment, as bread and circus, but really as people making money. So, and then for a few artists, it's artists making art, and then everyone else is copying them. Remember what I said about the poet? Remember, you're holding my beer. This idea of a shared universal God was a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of what was once upon a time a actual personal God, a family God. Um, family gods, right? There's more, humans' origins are pagan, not monotheistic. So our storytelling has changed over time. And it basically, well, if you understand the birth of tragedy in our present world, basically tragedy gave way to comedy and destroyed storytelling in the Western canon to where now tragedy cannot exist because remember, everyone's waiting for God to come back and destroy this wicked world. Or they're waiting for the revolution TM. Or, someone else. Basically, you can see everyone's looking for a paymaster, but no one's really doing anything. No, like nothing has changed. We've created a few superpowers and a perpetual war, but other than that, like that's been humanity's logical conclusion. Oh, in a glitzy television culture where what's actually sold to the average person is escaping the average life, right? That's America for you. So he's talking about these problems. So the fiction of image is not just a mention of televisual culture, but a response to it, an effort to impose some sort of accountability, right? And think about people who keep going about on and on about social media problems, how it affects people, the kids. Won't somebody please think of the children? It's an effort to impose some sort of accountability on a state of affairs in which more Americans get their news from television than from newspapers, and now from social media more than the news, and in which and remember this was in the 90s and listen to this, and in which more Americans every evening watch Wheel of Fortune more than the three network news programs combined. And by the way, all those three news networks were selling the same story anyway, right? Because that's what you can do when you have a monopoly on an entire culture's narrative sold through journalism. Journalism's a modern, shitty invention. You guys were told it was good. No, it's a modern, shitty invention that exists to sell advertising, and within the political sphere, it exists to support the war machine and those who tell its lies. So, where are we at? Americans every evening. Okay. And please see the image fiction, far from being a trendy avant-garde novelty, is almost atavistic. It's a natural adaptation, atavistic, moving backwards. It's like a cave age response. It's in a natural adaptation of the or primal or natural. There's many ways you can look at it. It's a natural adaptation of the hoary techniques of literary realism to a 90s world whose defining boundaries have been deformed by electric signal. And oh, this is what I meant when I say the culture's been blown out. There's no culture in which to house culture anymore. What you can get is a daily drip feed of manufactured narrative, but that's it. For realistic fiction, right? Because remember, once upon a time, there was some manifest destiny, and then once they had to give up on the Christian vision of the future, they turned it into the corporate model of the future, going, hey, we have this system of power, we have this war machine, we have this money. Doesn't matter that they're nihilistic, hedonic freaks who aren't fit to lead in the old world or the new world. They're the ones with the power, so that's how it goes. So for realistic fiction's big job used to be to afford easements across borders, to help readers leap over the walls of self and locale and show us unseen or dreamed of people and cultures and ways to be, right? It's reading and writing is a transfigurative and transformative process. I think Americans who only know it as imitation, who know it as busy work, who know it as something boring you do in school in between your job or things like that, like they don't understand this, but artists do. So show us today when we can eat Tex-Mex with chopsticks while listening to reggae and watching a Soviet satellite newscast of the Berlin Wall's fall, i.e., when darn near everything presents itself as familiar, right? Because everyone knows everything now. It's not a surprise that some of today's most ambitious realistic fiction, right? And now our social media, realistic social media, fiction is going about trying to make the familiar strange. And right, this is all, God, it's pathetic, really, how people try so hard to do so. In so doing, and demanding fictional access behind lenses and screens and headlines and reimagining what human life, look, and there's that word, this was before, like, he didn't put it in quotes, but these days you would use the word reimagining in quotes because it's part of the corporate speak. It's part of party language now. We're going to reimagine. What? We're going to fungineer your thinking. We're going to reimagine who and what you are. human life might truly be like over there across the chasms of illusion, mediation, demographics, marketing, image, and appearance. Notice he doesn't say class or race, right? These are all the touchy subject matters that Americans have long been too chicken shit to talk about. And the problem was, before anyone could be humanly honest about it, the corporation state got their hands on the race divide. And now, you guys bought that hook, line, and sinker. Because again, I told you before, I think our system runs just as much on hatred, more on hatred, jealousy, envy, right? Because this is the midwits province. This is commercialism's province, is to say, hey, you can transcend class, you can transcend money, when really the people who have money, money is the least consequential thing in the world. Who cares about money? Money is slave concerns, right? So, um, fictional access behind marketing, image, appearance. Image fiction is paradoxically trying to restore what's mistaken, misses in parentheses, and then taken is left open. So read it both ways. What human life might, so the point of image fiction was to imagine what human life might true, right? It's almost like religion. It's almost like anything else that stimulates the imagination and the psychodrama that the human spirit seems to need, whether that's watching drama on bad soap operas, bad reality TV, or bad social media, or bad TV. I say it's bad because most of it's just bad. Most of it's hack work made by hacks, right? In a country of largely C students, and then from there only slightly above average. Uh, okay, so what's I'm trying to read this both ways. We're reading this both ways. Reimagining what human life might truly be like over there across the chasms of illusion, mediation, demographics, marketing, image, and appearance. Image fiction is paradoxically trying to restore what's taken for real, what's mistaken for real, to three whole dimensions, to reconstruct a univocally round world out of disparate streams of flat sites. Right. So when I tell you that the news exists to both sell products, to spin a narrative, and to support the war machine, those are its ends. Like this trifecta, this trinity, this cathedral, this whatever metaphor you want to use, it exists to one end, out of disparate streams of flat sights and thoughts, out of the last 50 to 100 years of manufactured modern U.S. pop culture, mass culture. Again, remember, the people designing and selling it to you, if they're smart, they don't get high on their own supply. They don't watch it. They don't let their kids watch it. Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, or when like things like technology, you can see he puts pieces of tape over the cameras on his devices. Things like that all come to mind to show you, how this stuff is designed. Um, so that's the good news. The good news is so that's the good news. The bad news is that almost without exception, image fiction doesn't satisfy its own agenda, right? Even the narratives within our culture don't satisfy the agenda. Instead, it most often degenerates into a kind of jeering, surfacey look at behind the scenes of the very televisual front people already jeer at. You know what I've seen? I've seen people try to combat this with authentic content, right? Oh, we'll never lie to you. Oh, we'll just be on. It's like, you're trying to create something, but you want to rob it of all art. You want it to just be what, bare bones. Like, you're robbing the idea that there is a performance element to all commercialism, to all art, whether that's everything that's created, everything that's written, there's performative or relational aspects, right? If we remove the performance and say, okay, if you're writing something, it's technically for yourself and or someone else. In the sense that a self doesn't matter because to everyone else, their selves matter, right? Things begin to get really weird really quickly, but it's about the communications we send to each other. So he's saying that the good news, the bad news is that it doesn't satisfy its agenda. Instead, it most often degenerates, yeah, right, of the very televisual front people already jeer at and then can already get behind the scenes via Entertainment Tonight and remote control. So again, you can see over time that different attitudes arise and our culture might shift to be more authentic or less authentic, but either way, it's selling a fantasy, it's selling an image. The reason why today's images fiction isn't the rescue from a passive addictive TV psychology, and I could say the reason why people arguing on social media for or against social media, the reason why people arguing politics in the political sphere for or against the political sphere, right? You're in your ironic prisons, right? You're right where you're supposed to be. You're performing as the system designed you to perform, right? So addictive TV psychology, the is that most Imagist writers render their material with the same tone of irony, in the same self-consciousness that their ancestors, the literary insurgents of beat and postmodernism, used so effectively to rebel against their own world and context. And the reason why this is irreverent, and the reason why this irreverent postmodern approach fails to help the images transfigure TV. Oh, by the way, and in case you haven't noticed, all the now every other midwit in academia has gotten their hands on this language and this trash. And it's like they can't succeed in art, they can't succeed in business, so work for the state, right? TV is simply that TV. Oh shit, I think a lot of people might be upset about that, but I think it's true. I think that's what all these people mucking about with the postmodern language, the state language, the human resources language, the corporation state language. That's what they're ironically doing. They're basically writing TV commercials no one will ever watch. Ironic TV commercials no one will ever watch. And they just, and I guess within the context of academia and even outside, the satire has become so bad that you can't, a lot of times people can't even tell what's satire and what's real anymore. That's your hyper real world, right? That's your blown apart world. That's what that brain rot is, of people endlessly scrolling to where they can no longer tell what's an advertisement, what's a commercial to make a product, to sell you a product. By the way, it's all commercial products designed to sell you products, because what's the other point of needing your attention so damn bad? Whether that's selling you the perpetual war that isn't happening, or the next trend, or the next jargon that you need to use for those in institution and academy, right? The next volume of doublespeak. So uh, so the problem is it's beaten the artist to the punch. So the reason why you're not the rescue, the reason why all of you, the reason why you're an impotent, right, is beat postmodern. The reason why this irreverent postmodern approach fails to help the images transfigure TV is simply that TV has beaten the images to the punch. The fact is that for at least 10 years now, right, going on much longer, television has been ingeniously absorbing, homogenizing, and representing the very cynical postmodern aesthetic that was once the best alternative to the appeal of low, over easy, mass marketed narrative. How TV's done this is blackly fascinating to see. It's dark too. It really is. This, because you can see, again, you reverse engineer the psychopathy of the people who produce a lot of the programs and the content and the language, and it's also their willingness to bombard the human mind. Their very willingness to create the product to then use to manipulate the consumer. Their willingness to then sell it, right? Again, all you need, like any crime family, right? Like any oligarchy, like any monopoly, you need a leader, and then you need people willing to do the dirty work because they need the money, they need the power. They're not going to do it themselves mostly, right? Again, I told you before, everyone's looking for the paymaster. Very few people are capable of ever distinguishing themselves. So a quick intermission contra paranoia. By saying that the fiction of image aims to rescue us from TV, I again am not suggesting that, right, and it's no different in philosophy, it's no different anywhere else where people talk about religion and therapy and psychology as a means of helping people, right? And the difference in approach is what realistically helps the only thing that's real, which is the individual, versus what is a delusional dream state, what is a fantasy, what is removing you from the reality of human need right in front of you. Right, so I'm speaking from a position of human need, a human reality, by saying, and change of need too, because needs change over time, right? Ask parents, ask children. By saying that the fiction of image aims to rescue, okay, I'm just referring again to the kind of audience conditioning consequent to high doses, a conditioning so subtle it can be observed best obliquely through examples. If a term like conditioning still seems either hyperbolic or empty to you, right? Everyone thinks it's normal. No, it's not. It's not hyperbolic. Now what's frightening is people will even say, I like it that way. I like my McDonald's world. I want the corporation. I want the state, even though they'll turn on a dime and the double speak of it and complain about the state and the taxes and the this and the that, and oh, they're going to revolt. Like liberals have their fantasies, conservatives have their fantasies, but they're both out of touch with reality. They're both owned by the party, right? Those are the party lines. And it's one uniparty, and it's war. I ask you to consider for a moment the exemplary issue of prettiness. One of the things that makes people on TV or social media fit to stand the mega gaze is that they are, by human standards, really pretty, or above averagely pretty. Social media made it so that people with other talents and abilities could offer themselves, but this is washed out. Like you saw it in reality TV as well. Reality TV, but you could even see that back then people were either average or above average, and in case people have forgotten, average is acceptable in this world, especially in America. It's a country of average, designed for average by a select few above average. Um, so it makes them fit because by human standards they're really pretty. I suspect that this, like most television conventions, is set up with no motive more sinister than appeal to the largest possible audience, right? Pretty people tend to be more pleasing to look at than non-pretty people, right? And this is people complaining about the ideal and the standard. But why? It's like because people don't want to look at ugly people. What do you want from them, right? It's like asking, do you want to be poor and stupid, or do you want to be rich and smart? What do you think people prefer? What do you think they? How do you think people want to see themselves? What do you think people are aspiring to, especially in a psychotic culture that is obsessed with wealth and power and status, right? It's just, it's really delusional, both the for and against, and it all exists trapped within this ironic prison, right? So pretty people tend to be more pleasing to look at. But when we're talking about television, the combination of sheer audience size and quite psychic intercourse between images and oglers starts a cycle that both enhances pretty images appeal and erodes us viewers' own security in the face of gazes, right? Because you realize, oh, you're not the image, you're not the sexy model, right? And know that the whatever weird beetle men and women, whatever creeps and weirdos and oglers are behind the scenes writing this shitty, cruddy image, to then tack on to what is naturally beautiful, i.e., the model. Whoever's writing the slogans to try to sell the model. It's like actually you didn't need the writer, right? A person is naturally attractive. When someone speaks naturally, when someone acts naturally, it's the most attractive and like it's the most magnetic thing in the world. But in a world of scripts and NPCs, right? In a world where everything's prefabricated in design, you see how that staccato attack and that manipulation both becomes more and less apparent. So he's pointing out that he thinks this is just the natural discourse. People prefer what's pretty. People want money, they don't want to be broke. People want beauty, they don't want ugliness, right? People want to be secure, they don't want to be insecure. But how secure is the average American, right? We're talking about television, the combination of sheer. Okay, read that. Here you go. Because of the way human beings relate to narrative, we tend to identify with those characters we find appealing. We try to see ourselves in them. The same ID relation, however, also means that we try to see them in ourselves. When everybody we seek to identify with for 6 hours a day is pretty, it naturally becomes more important to us to be pretty, to be viewed as pretty, because prettiness becomes a priority for us. The pretty people on TV become all the more attractive, a cycle which is so obviously great for TV, right? So again, top 15% of people, right? They design it, they market it, they act it, they're the ideal image. Most people are not the top 15% of looks, of intelligence, of writing, of creativity, of art, of intelligence, of business, of anything, right? Most people are the bottom 85%. But it's less than great for us civilians who tend to our own mirrors and who also tend not to be anywhere near as pretty as the images we try to identify with. Not only does this cause some angst personally, but the angst increases because nationally everybody else is absorbing 6 hours doses and identifying with pretty people and devaluing prettiness more too. They're devaluing both, right? Because ugliness already has no value and prettiness has been watered down, or that there's a limited pool. This very personal anxiety, or you can't be it if you're not it. This very personal anxiety about our prettiness has become a national phenomenon with national consequences. The whole USA gets different about things it values and fears, and it's gotten weirder and more schizoid and crazier, right? It's only gotten more crazier over the years, both the leadership and the people at the bottom. The boom in diet aids, health and fitness clubs, it's crazier than ever. There's a glut more than ever. Neighboring tanning parlors, cosmetic surgery, anorexia, bulimia, steroid use among boys, girls throwing acid at each other because one girl's hair looks more like Farrah Fawcett's than one another's. Are those supposed to be unrelated to each other? And oh gosh, if I were to start everything from derailing trains to social media to the dumbest people thinking they can compete and contend with the smartest people by the proliferation of their bad artists trying to compete with good artists, or and look, and I'm not saying that things don't belong. Everything has its place in the world, right? Like Marcus Aurelius said, people work together. You got the upper teeth and the lower teeth, and then you guys chew each other up, right? And break each other against each other. It's funny, you guys are sold stoicism. It's like stoicism was created by an emperor. It wasn't meant for the masses. Why would you sell stoicism to the masses? Well, because you should accept your lot. You should accept your plight. Be stoic about your pointless, modern, nihilistic life in this system that doesn't only that has on one hand disregard for men and masculinity, and on one side hatred for men and masculinity. Whether that's our intelligence, right? Because who needs it? Who needs Winston to ask you questions? Who needs Winston to get in the way? Who needs Winston to be crazy, right? How can you go against this, Winston? You lone viewer, Joe Briefcase, how can you go against this? How can you argue with it? Look how totalizing it. Look how mesmerized everyone is by the sexy TV culture, by the sexy social media culture, by the mainstream narrative that has to exist because it needs a coherent story to make sense of the war machine. Why? Because otherwise people might check out. Otherwise people might not want to be a part of it. Otherwise people might realize that the system is actually hostile to them, their life, and their family. And wasn't meant to benefit them. It was meant to use them. So that's what the audience is for, right? It's to be used for the person creating the commercial content. Pretty people tend to, okay, we already covered that. It becomes important for us to be pretty, right? You're all such pretty girls. The whole USA gets different things about what it values and fears, right? It's gotten more schizoid. Um, Are these supposed to be unrelated? Are these supposed to be to the apotheosis of prettiness in a televisual culture? So, hey, all you postmodernists, you postmodernists, hey, all you dummies and midwits in academia, mucking it up with your penises in the sky and your anti-masculine, deconstruct the world mindsets that have been sold to you, that you bought by indentured servitude through student debt to a corporation state, its biggest institution, right? You get to pretend like you're against the institution while hiding in it, right? That's convenient. So he's asking, is this the apotheosis of the norm, of the status quo you're supposedly fighting? No, you're fucking cowards. You're chicken shits. You're useless. You're actually useless to the culture. And I think it's reflected in the jargon you create. It reflects the helplessness, right? This is why the irony of it is tyranny. I keep pointing that out. The tyranny of pointlessly blathering on and mindlessly attacking what you're both paying and have been paid to mindlessly attack. Do you see how it's just, again, it's just keeping you in a desk? It's the antithesis to human life. It's the antithesis to human values. It's literally producing a nation of dependent slaves in the intellectual realm, people who can't think outside of a desk, right? Just like the idea that if someone can't work without someone to pay them, well, it shows you that they would probably never create a business. They'd never do anything on their own motivation because they're always looking or waiting for someone else in the world to reward them. And I'm pointing out about our cynical, shitty TV factory, corporate capitalist pseudo-socialist model with its pretenses towards humanism, which is really just post-moral, post-protest, post-postmodern, right? Hyper-real, unreal. Really, it's a system of power that benefits a perpetual war machine. Right? I'm going to keep talking about this because it matters. And it matters that someone says it and doesn't let you forget, right? Because from the day to day, everyone forgets. You guys are going to forget tomorrow. You're going to believe when they lie to you tomorrow, when you buy the lie tomorrow, you're going to forget that that same institution or that same person just lied to you yesterday. You're going to go, oh, look, it's interesting. Oh, look, maybe he's telling me the truth. Wait, what? Right? So, what are we saying is that is this postmodernism? Is this critique? Are these values? Are these the apotheosis to a rotten status quo, to a lie, a fantasy status quo, right? To an unreal status quo, to a status quo that has nothing to do with contemporary Americans' needs and wants, right? Our politics have jumped the shark in the same way. It's just Big Brother can't allow you to point that out. It can't, like, if you pointed out how pointless and nihilistic and dead end it was, you know, it's fatalistic. We can't have that. This is a comedy, right? We're still waiting for Buddy Christ to come back and save us, right? So, and with a contemporary culture, it's a, you know, it's just people working within institutions for a bit of power and for their own selfish ends. I think most modern protesters are selfish too. The protest just has nothing to do with reality, has nothing to do with anything. It doesn't matter. Also, there's no real skin in the game. If you don't actually have something to lose, there's no real skin in the game. And sure, throwing yourself stupidly against forces that could easily destroy you or damage you, like American protesters have long done. But since they have no coherent or singular goal, you see that nothing ever changes or happens. By the way, for those who want to understand how that works in the modern context, I recommend Norwegian Wood by Murakami because it's basically he's pointing back how even in the 60s this cycle of student protest, pointless hypocrisy, and then everything being reabsorbed by the corporation state, by the institution, that one minute the students are protesting, the next minute they're feeding from the institution's hands, right? That this kind of thing, it's been bought and sold out for decades now. And then with all these eyes watching, it's harder for a nation state to like send a bunch of tanks to break up, let's say, a student protest. So we have to allow it in the West because it fits our humane tradition. But you better believe the moment the cameras are off, the protest is over. Nothing was risked, nothing was ventured, nothing was gained. So let's see, I'm gonna have to start winding this up soon and finish more of this off later. It's not paranoid or hysterical to acknowledge that television in large doses affects people's values and self-esteem in deep ways. Social media, yes. Politics, yes. Modern narratives, yes. It's psychotic. The television conditioning influences the whole psychology of one's relation to himself, his mirror, his loved ones, and a world of real people and real gazes. It's surgical. No one's going to claim that a culture all about watching and appearing is fatally comprised by unreal standards of beauty and fitness. So let me read that again, in case it got confusing there. No one's going to claim that a culture all about watching and appearing is fatally compromised by unreal standards of beauty and fitness. Right, because that's the carrot on the stick. It's not compromised by the carrot on the stick. It exists to be a carrot on a stick. So, but other facets of TV training reveal themselves as more rapacious, more serious than any irreverent fiction writer would want to take seriously. Oh, it's dark, right? And this is getting into irony's aura. So this is where we left off yesterday, right? So we were talking about how this stuff had come to manifest in our shallow, cynical TV culture where characters like Al Bundy survived their survival. They just survived the modern cynical morass of, look at these shitty people I'm stuck with. Hey, I'd rather be anywhere else but here, but since I'm stuck here with you, I'm just going to be a shitty tyrant with no power, right? I'm going to point out the cage bars, but I have no power to affect or change that, right? See, that was Al Bundy's reality. Al Bundy was a helpless man, and our media has increasingly created and reflected that image, right? And Bundy, just like Frank Zappa was talking about in the 90s, the Bundy character was the evolution of an iteration and creation of a certain type of American man over time, right? And why did he become so popular? Because it was so relatable, right? It was relatable to the modern, cynical, jaded, American drowning in their shallow consumer culture, watching 6 hours of this kind of tripe punctuated with insane advertising that just bombarded his brain with lights and colors and all sorts of Pavlovianly trained responses or attacks or stimulations. So we were talking about how on these sitcoms, how just like in our politics, a person is held up in the media, attacked as a straw man. Never mind that they don't explore the man's real values or what his real life is. Like our real life is now models our fiction, and that caricatures of people that represent values are torn down by ironical postmodern hip cats. You know, people who are too cool for school, right? That was an attitude that's been sold for a long time. Um, so I don't want to read or reread these long lists of example, but to get to the point of it, its promulgation of cynicism about all authority works to the general advantage of television on a number of levels. First, to the extent that TV can ridicule old-fashioned conventions right off the map, it can create an authority vacuum, and then guess what fills it, right? This is what this is what postmodern irony does. This is what they did in Academy, right? We can create the authority vacuum and then fill it. The real authority on a world we now view as constructed and not depicted, right? We're not seeing reality, we're seeing constructed images, becomes the medium that constructs our worldview. Constructions of constructions all the way down. Meta reality all the way down. Meta irony, meta tyranny all the way down. Soft tyranny all the way down. Second, to the extent that TV can refer exclusively to itself and debunk conventional standards as hollow, it is invulnerable to critics' charges that what's on it shallow or crass, or that what's on it is shallow or crass or bad, since any judgments appeal to conventional extra televisual standards about depth, taste, and quality, right? Don't hold us to a standard. We're just giving the people what they want, right? Don't ever hold anyone to a standard. Right? This is the tyranny of it, is you get to have your cake and eat it too. which has a cost. See, this is why our insurance rates are so high. This is why the country and its reality and its people are failures on the most humane and humanistic levels. That they have no values, that they have no economic or real tangible value even to other human beings. That these people have been trained and conditioned to not see any value or not be able to find value in human beings. Why? If you found value in other human beings, you might actually be able to have power, just like oligarchs learn, versus being taught to be a captive of those who have the power and can sell you the answers, right? So, promulgation of cynicism, guess what fills the gaps? You know, the TV culture, the low art is the same as the high art. So basically, everyone is freed from responsibility, right? This is the problem. When I say I don't see any men, this is why I despise American TV culture and social media. There are almost no men who will throw their dice, put their name on it, say what they really mean. You guys, you follow party lines, you follow chicken shit lines, you get in line, but so much of it is just garbage. So much of it is against men and their needs, and therefore against society's needs, because it turns out you need men to have a society. Because look, and then most realistically, someone needs to do all the dirty work for you, right? Someone needs to get their hands dirty, and that's men. None of the rest of you are doing it, right? So someone's got to do it. Anyway, um, so the ironic tone of TV's self-reference means that no one can accuse TV of trying to put anything over on anybody. As S.A. Lewis Hyde points out, its self-mocking irony is sincerity with a motive, right? Don't blame us, but buy from us. And more to the original point, if television can invite Joe Briefcase, the average American, if Joe and Susan social media, if television can invite Susan social media into itself via in-gags and irony and memes, right? Memes are the new thing. It can ease that painful modern memes, not even Richard Dawkins memes. Like a meme is a copy of an idea of an idea down to its most basic visual representation. Twitter brought it down to its lowest characterological, in the language representation. But it's like less and less. Like anyway, I just keep going here. Getting too excited and excitable. It can ease that painful tension between Joe's need to transcend the crowd and his status as audience member. Right? This is the desires of the spectators to be actors, right? This is all the imitators. Is everyone going, you know what, yeah, I like that, I'm going to take that. And that's what we all do it. It's right? It's part of life. Before you can learn, you imitate. Before you can learn to do it yourself, you imitate. For to the extent that TV can flatter Joe about seeing through the pretentiousness and hypocrisy of outdated values, same thing with social media and politics, it can induce in him precisely the feeling of canny superiority it's taught him to crave, right? But also keeps you apart and removed from, and can keep him dependent on the cynical TV watching that alone affords this feeling. And to the extent that it can train viewers to laugh at characters' unending put downs of one another, right? And this is how, and look, I know, there is some of this natural violence, play violence that's normal, you could say. And you can even see it in other animals and species like kittens. Kittens are the cutest killers you'll ever see in the natural kingdom, right? Babies, like human babies, are kind of similar, right? But the prisoner conditions is a hyperstasis of sorts. It's putting the hyperstasis on a hyper treadmill, right? And giving it methamphetamine. And to the extent that it can train viewers to laugh at characters' unending put-downs of one another, to view ridicule as both the mode of social intercourse, right? And social media, man, you look at comment section, is just brutal. You can look at, basically, if you're remotely aware of our dark future of dystopic imagery, you can basically look at any image on the internet and know immediately what the comments are going to say. You just go, oh God, this person's going to be judged so hard. Oh, they're going to be so nasty. Oh, they're going to be so mean. You're never surprised. You won't be surprised because this is normalized. This is normal now, right? The hate is normal. The hate is part of the game. It's built into the game. The hate is profitable. For the well-conditioned viewer, becomes leaving oneself open to others' ridicule by betraying passé expressions of value, emotion, or vulnerability. Other people become judges. The crime is naivete. The well-trained, lonely viewer becomes even more allergic to people, lonelier. Joe B's exhaustive TV training and now social media training and political training and newspeak training and human resources training, all these divisions that our culture has rendered the individual pathological to themselves and one another, right? Is how to worry about how he might come across, how you might seem to other eyes, and this is me as an image consultant. Hello, I told you my premise is different. Makes riskily genuine human encounters seem even scarier, right? It's trained you guys to be chicken shits. Men are afraid of women, women are afraid of men. But televisual irony, right? It used to be normal that you guys would interact. Now you guys just hate each other, right? Remember, the domination of the party was predicated on sex going sour. For a party to get more power, we have to experience more population decline and probably more insanity that will more insanity and violence will necessitate them clamping down on both power and probably avenues like media and social media. Because remember, guys and gals, nothing is ever released without government consent. Formerly, it was the FCC and all sorts of governing bodies that ruled what you could or couldn't say or do or advertise. But again, when the Christians and the capitalists realized, hey, by selling out your morals, you can make a lot of money by basically using your morals as the centerpiece, by using your moral as the attractive image, you can make a lot of money. Cha-ching, right? This is our dystopic post-moral image fiction future, right? Of actors and actresses and everything's fake. And most everyone is fake. And that's how they're conditioned and taught to be. Doesn't mean they can't have real, genuine human experiences. Doesn't mean they're not real human beings. It doesn't mean and they can't most of the times they can't even lead productive lives. By that I mean their own organic productive natural activity. They're on someone else's treadmill. They're getting paid by someone else. They're looking for someone else, saying, will someone else help me here? Will someone else educate me and train me and school me, and I'll pay you, right? I'll pay you that you can train me and do me and teach me how to live, right? That is our system, and it's mainly taught by a corporation state. So it makes the problem is the cynical cycle makes real human engagement harder and worse. But televisual irony and social media irony has a solution to the problem. It's aggravated. Further viewing begins to seem like almost required research. All marketers know this. All image fiction people know this. Makes risk further viewing, and all content creators know this. And then a lot of content makers, they make a lot of money off of reacting to other content creators precisely in this domain regarding image and image fiction. Why aren't people successful? Content is king, always has been, always will be. But televisual irony has a solution to the problem. It's aggravated. Further viewing is required research. Lessons in the blank board, too wise expression that Joe must learn how to wear for tomorrow's excruciating ride on the brilliantly lit subway, where crowds of blank board looking people have little to look at but each other. We fix that with social media. Now you can just stare at social media and not each other, right? Thank God, right? Remember what I said earlier? Anywhere else but here, everyone got the Bundy model. You can carry the TV around you and cynically get lost in it, right? And just make ironic Bundy-like or Peg-like remarks to yourself. Because remember, for every Bundy, there's a Peggy, and Peggy was also no saint. She was also part of the cynical problem. So what does TV's institutionalization of hip irony have to do with U.S. fiction? Well, for one thing, American literary fiction tends to be about U.S. culture and the people who inhabit it. This is where he's getting into the dirt of it. Culture-wise, shall I spend much of your time pointing out the degree to which televisual values influence the contemporary mood of jaded Welshmeres? Self-mocking materialism, blank indifference, and the delusion that cynicism and naivete are mutually exclusive, right? Double think, double speak. Can we deny connections between an unprecedentedly powerful consensual medium that suggests no real difference between image and substance, and the rise of Teflon presidencies, the establishment of nationwide tanning and liposuction industries, the popularity of voguing, right, he's talking about memes, or in serious contemporary art, the televisual disdain for hypocritical retro values like originality, depth, and integrity has no truck with those recombinant appropriation styles, postmodern, post-postmodern, welcome to your nihilistic world of no meaning and purpose, of impotent man, of vengeful impotent man, of consumer man, of mass man, of last man, styles of art and architecture in which the past becomes pastiche, or with the tuneless solemnization of a glass or a wreck, or with the self-conscious catatonia of a platoon of Raymond Carver wannabes. He's basically pointing out how our commercial culture has taken everything old and new about our highest culture and our art and our most admirable individuals and rendered it down to nothing. Image and imitation, completely removed from its necessary component as part and parcel to human life, human need. It's largely that is self-conscious but unknown, ignorant, however you want to put it. Thus, it resonates with people in the first place. In fact, the numb blank bored demeanor that my best friend calls the girl who's dancing with you but who would obviously rather be dancing with somebody else expression that has become my generation's version of cool is all about television. Television, after all, literally means seeing far. And our 6 hours daily not only helps us feel up close and personal, but obversely trains us to see real life personal up close the same way we relate to the distant and the exotic. Right? And you see this with social media, is separated from us by physics and glass, extant only as performance awaiting our cool review. Think of the endless photos out there of a crowd of people at a concert holding up the phone. Like once upon a time, people held lighters, right? A lighter is something real and physical. It can hurt you even. I suppose a phone, you could break the glass or smash it into someone's face, right? More, but its pain is more indirect. A lighter, you can start a fire, right? There's something to a group of everyone holding up torches. There's something to everyone holding up a group of cameras and microphones. That was just a thought in the moment. I don't know, I want to play it out further, but I don't even know where it goes. But to keep moving here, is it separated? Right. So reality, people get further and further removed from reality, hyper reality. Indifference is actually just the contemporary version of frugality. For US young people wooed several gorgeous hours a day for nothing but our attention, we regard that attention as our chief commodity. A lot of you thought you were profound observing this in recent eras. Oh, God, attention is the chief commodity. It's a new commodity. God, this guy was saying in the 90s, you guys are all behind. Like I said just above, he's pointing out how whether it's ancient culture or recent culture, the marketplace just keeps taking the same thing and reselling it. And by the time they do so, you guys have forgotten that you were already sold this. You already bought it. Now it's just worth less. It was once yours for free. Actually, it was once there for you. Now it's gone. Now you have to buy it, right? And usually in second-rate form. Whether or not 1990s youth culture seems right, and this is where a lot of people talk about other countries steal from America, China, Russia, no one steals more from America than Americans. Not just the ruling class, but every half-assed capitalist, every mediocre artist. All you guys copy and steal, and you've always done it. And that's been part of the game too, right? Whether that's getting a copyright or stealing a copyright. And the idea that a copyright even is real. No, in the animal kingdom, if you took my shit, I would just hurt you. Now you want to hide behind a state, right? Like this is what's insane is that we have a fake system that enables fake people to live fake lives that are far removed from the reality of our animal needs and our animal conditions. And then they think it's normal or real, but the reality and the violence are quickly catching up, right? And you can see this with naive, ignorant people. Best example I could think of, look at countless pictures in Yellowstone where just modern people who are used to being separated by physics and glass, they'll walk up to a fucking bison, and then when they're gored or nearly killed by this animal, what are they thinking? Like, oh, it's cute, it's tame? No, animals are wild. Man is also animal. Man also retains a wild core despite your domestication and attempt to enrapture his surplus cognition behind glass and screens. So this has profound effects for our reality, for our perception of reality, and then the way we interact with it and how we buy and sell it. So I'm going to finish this thought, and the rest I'll resume later because I'm already going over an hour here. I know that's more than most people's attention can stand, especially given my style, my methodology, and my approach of going over and re-going over and exploring all the nooks and crannies and throwing out the ideas so that they're there for your examination in real time, right? This isn't a script. This isn't a speech. This is just thinking about it like a human being with both not just intelligence, but reason, right? They're two different things. Exotic, okay, as if separated by physics and glass, extant only as performance, awaiting or something to be recorded for your viewing pleasure and your consuming pleasure or your posting pleasure, right? Awaiting our cool review. Indifference is actually just the contemporary version of frugality. Read that. Oh yeah, attention as our chief commodity, our social capital, and we are loath to fritter it. In the same regard, see that in 1990, flatness, numbness, and cynicism in one's demeanor are clear ways to transmit the televisual attitude of standout transcendence. Flatness is a transcendence of melodrama. Numbness transcends sentimentality, and cynicism announces that one knows the score. Was last naive about something at maybe like age 4 or 5. Gosh, you know, actually, that kind of shit. Whether or not 1990s youth culture seems as grim to you as it does to me, surely we can agree that the culture's TV-defined pop ethic has pulled a marvelous touche on the postmodern aesthetic that originally sought to co-opt and redeem the pop. And what a delusion that was. What did you think you were going to do? You were going to change the nature of television? You were going to make people smart? You were going to change the fact that most people don't read? Right? This is why it's the imago populi that he says, the baby boomer imago populi that he says. It became the image of the people because it's our bread and circus. It's what's most accessible. It's what we love. It's what's available. It's what we were raised on. It's what we were conditioned to believe is normal, whether it's consumption or production. So, right, to assume that you could assimilate the rebel, to assume you could assimilate the philosopher and the poet, no, you could copy him. You can't be him. Television has pulled the old dynamics of reference and redemption inside out. You can benefit from him, you can learn from him, but if you're not him, you're not him. An artist is not the same as a capitalist. It is now television that takes elements of the postmodern, the involution, the absurdity, the sardonic fatigue. This is just commercialism, guys. This is the capitalist, the boomer selling out the human, the art, iconoclasm and rebellion, the psychodrama, the religion, and bends them to the ends of expectation, and consumption. In the same way the state bends back everything to its purpose, television bends back everything to its purpose, right? You can't have love or purity of emotion in this world, Winston. Everything is contaminated with fear and hatred and competition and jealousy. What began as a move, so quote unquote, as early as 84, critics of capitalism were warning that what began as a mood of the avant-garde has surged into mass culture, became the mass culture, is the mass culture. You guys came to believe in it. You came to believe in what was manufactured, post-manufactured. So we were manufacturing non-existent styles and trends that weren't even reflective of reality until we ran that into the ground. Rendering humanity unnecessary to itself, physically, tangibly, also emotionally and artistically and creatively. Is continually tying the human being's hands until all that we have is a shitty corporate model to run on. Right? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? You're going to try and compete? That's the point of a monopoly, is to have no competition. They used to have antitrust laws for a reason. They used to break up monopolies. I think that was a fluke in history. Anti-monopoly in America was really government consolidating power by not allowing any other entity to get too powerful to compete with it. Now that all these things are one entity finding its nature in the corporation state, obviously the word monopoly ceases to exist. Just remove that from the language, remove that as an idea or a possibility, and then the slaves will even say, I love this monopoly, I love this totalitarian regime, I love having no options in school, work, life, people, culture, or having so many options as to have no options, right? They works both ways, right? I love the freedom of being in a desert with nowhere to go. I love being in a desperate corporate culture of sick, sad people who are on drugs and maladaptive, and whose needs are not being met either by the corporation or the state or what they provide. Anyway, I was trying to get to a stopping point here, but postmodernism didn't just all of a sudden surge into television in 1984, nor have the vectors of influence between the postmodern and the televisual been one way. The chief connection between today's television and today's fiction is historical. The two share roots. For postmodern fiction, written almost exclusively by young white males, clearly evolved as an intellectual expression of a rebellious youth culture of the 60s and the early 70s. And since the whole great gestalt of youthful US, right, and then you guys made that for the masses, and then thought you were doing something clever or original, freaking absurd, copies of copies. And since the whole gestalt of youthful US rebellion is made possible by a national medium that erased communicative boundaries between regions and replaced a society segmented by location and ethnicity, i.e. race and class, which he doesn't say, with what rock music critics have called a national self-consciousness stratified by generation, a viable commercial culture that, hey, even the old uptight white guys will sell because they see it's profitable. Yeah, right? They can't be cool, but they can sell what's cool. This is a lot of fiction writers. This is kind of what he talks about at the beginning of the essay. So, in the sense that capitalists are fiction writers of their own variety, by manipulating the world around them, so are artists and intellectuals. So, rebellious irony as it did with peaceniks protest rallies. Okay, the phenomenon. Okay, it was saying the phenomenon of TV had as much to do with postmodernism's rebellious irony, as it did with peaceniks protest rallies. So it's an evolution and a slow change of the culture within these same kind of commercial loops. In fact, by offering young, overeducated fiction writers a comprehensive view of how hypocritically the USA saw itself circa 1960, right, and whether that was creating a needless class in the corporation or in the institution, right? What do you even do with all these people who have useless degrees, are overeducated, right? Overqualified is what it's called, but in reality, there never really existed any jobs for these thinkers, for these creative people, right? We didn't need creative people in a capitalistic country that dominates people by basic task work and sells it a fantasy of transcending said task work, right? Oh shit! And I guess this is where we do arrive at the tyranny of irony, right? It's Black Mirror. There's an episode called, was it 15 million credits? Yeah, it's dismal. Don't watch it. It's horrible. So basically, I'm going to get into the managerial demiurge, and then we're going to stop it. So, by offering young, overeducated fiction writers and students a comprehensive view of how hypocritically the USA saw itself circa 1960, early television helped legitimize absurdism and irony as not just literary devices, but sensible responses to an unrealistic world, right? Ugh, you're that stupid. Ugh, let me be ironic since I can't be honest about how stupid you are because you won't understand because you're stupid, right? For irony, exploiting gaps between what's said and what's meant, between how things try to appear and how they really are. Amongst a respectable teacher, irony is the greatest teaching tool. To everyone else, it's a commercial product. Is the time-honored way artists seek to eliminate and explode hypocrisy. And the television of lone gunman westerns, paternalistic sitcoms, and jet-jawed law enforcement circa 1960 celebrated a deeply hypocritical American self-image. Right, and this is serious, guys. Right, as I was getting into about masculinity and the images sold, by the time they were selling this in corporate culture, like most men, like they were far removed from that reality. Miller describes nicely how the 1960s sitcom, like the westerns that preceded them, negated the increasing powerlessness of white-collar males with the images of paternal strength and manly individualism. Yet by the time these sitcoms were the Hugh Beaumontish ones of self-possession, probity, and sound judgment, had long since been superseded by what C. Wright Mills called the managerial demiurge, and the virtues personified by dad were in fact passe. By the time anyone was going, what happened to masculinity? Oh, what happened to men? Oh, we hate men. Men are stupid. Men are the worst. By the time you guys got there, like you guys had sold us out a long time ago. You guys had partitioned aspects of us off. You guys had constantly berated us and judged us. You guys had said this. You took from us. You stole from us. You stole our art. You stole our language. You stole everything about men that made us great and doled it out into this commercial system and allowed some of it to exist here, some of it to exist there. Part of civilization is sacrificing the self, but essentially sacrificing the individual self became sacrificing man for the masses, right? This is why you guys are last men. This is why you're in the last man applies to last women too. You are just creatures at the end of your ropes, at the end of the line. There's nowhere for humanity to go from here, right? When dad himself, when masculinity, when the need of men itself has become passe and bored because a perpetual warfare shows you that war is peace, thus things are stable, thus you don't need men, at least when you're at least in your day-to-day life, or that's what you have the luxury of thinking because you are far removed from reality and the reality is hidden by a media image. Do you see the nightmare? Do you see the problem? It's a nightmare in broad daylight. This is why no one can tolerate it. This is why the market can't honestly address it, because to do so is fatalistic. To do so is admit its own failure and its own lies. And the party cannot do that. The party has to be right. The system has to be correct. I hope you guys understand this. If you're against it, right? You might as well be burning down your old house in a certain sense, right? This is why Winston is insane. Back to our 1984 dialogue, right? Our discussion, that Winston is insane because the power of the politics is so apparent and in his face, but he refuses to accept reality, right? So once upon a time, we had artists to postulate and theorize, and scientists too, to examine that space between the real and the unreal, and to pull out and create what was formerly unreal. They would create what's real. It's almost like a magic trick, like a poet kind of does it. And everyone who imitates the poet wants to do it. Everyone who wants to be creative does it in some capacity. But what we're left dealing with is a society that thwarts man's creative and transcendental urges at every angle, and also devalues and imprisons him through language, through training, through conditioning, through institutions, through thought patterns and thought processes that aren't designed to foster human freedom, human faith, human belief, human creativity, but only to control, channel, and ultimately profit off of them. So I hope that's not too dark to begin your day. I don't know that there is a silver lining, because I'm pointing out this is end of the line. Where do you go in a hyper real world? Where do you go in a world of perpetual war? Because no matter where you go, the war will find you. Yes, monks have long sought escape in the refuge. Like I think a lot of Westerners think, for instance, like you take religious people and they think it's cute or quaint that, oh, why did they go live in the woods? Why did they go live by themselves? To avoid persecution, is to avoid getting killed, right? And throughout all human history, witches and monks and artists and creative types and intellectuals and scientists of all variety have been fighting against a suicidal and homicidal mass that says they're not allowed to exist. So I really want you to understand, when I say the tension still remains between individual and group, that has not changed. Anyway, I'm Zach Markowski with Sharper Pen Image Consulting. This has been our ongoing discussion of David Foster Wallace's essay, Unibus Pluram, basically TV culture, telecomputer culture as well. Commercialism in modern America, now in modern social media America, because this was back in the 90s. Thanks again for your time. Lots more to come. I'll pick this up a little bit later today. Thanks.